Next up, we have Paul Addis, Libertarian candidate for Lieutenant Governor.
Thank you.
Mr. Addis.
Yes, thank you. I'm Paul Addis. I live in Kent, Washington with my beautiful wife of 18 years, Kathy, and I'm running as Libertarian for Lieutenant Governor this year. The Constitution of Washington was written to establish a representative government, and that means to represent the people, not a political party, or not corporations, and certainly not special interests, but the people. Too often, good legislation does not see the light of day because of partisan gridlock, and bad legislation is passed due to the influence of lobbyists and special interests on both of the entrenched parties. Let's get the government out of your business so business can thrive in Washington, and let's get big business out of government so government can efficiently and effectively carry out their service to the people. Our future success depends on small business owners, entrepreneurs, and community leaders across this great state. And those in Olympia will serve best who allow those leaders to make decisions at the most local level. I'm Paul Addis, your Libertarian candidate for Lieutenant Governor. Thank you.
And now for a question that all of you will answer, I'm going to turn it over to my compatriot here, Greg McCollum.
All right, yes, this question is for all candidates. We will start with Senator Frazier, then go Senator Hobbs, and so forth. Early in his administration, Lieutenant Governor Brad Owen adopted the motto, helping kids grow up in safe and healthy communities with opportunity, as his cornerstone of policy. To that end, he is focused on the prevention of substance abuse, especially among youth, economic development, and international relations. What would you say would be your cornerstone of policy? And Mr. Addis.
Yes, I'm with Senator Frazier on not adding any more duties to the Lieutenant Governor position. There are a lot of issues that are facing Washingtonians all across the state. For me to say that I have the answer to your issues is a little presumptuous and actually a little more authoritarian than I would like to be in that position. What I believe in is competition and the free market. I think competition breeds efficiency, breeds innovation, and frankly, solutions. You have issues in Eastern Washington that we may not have the same solutions for in Western Washington or in Spokane or Vancouver or Seattle. So what I'd like to see is more decentralization and pushing those decisions and that activity out to the local level so that we can find the solutions that work best for you. For example, if there's a waiting list for families wanting to get their kids in charter schools, why is it so difficult for Olympia to pass that type of legislation if that's what the people want, based on the fact that there's a waiting list? So I would like to make sure that it's much easier for the communities across Washington State to experiment and to find out exactly what does work best. And that's the example I would like to be, not necessarily a cornerstone or anything I would push, but just to be that example and promote that idea.
Thank you. Now we have one more question for all of you, but I'm going to see how good you all are on time management. I'd like to hear your stances on 3 statewide initiatives that are likely to be on the ballot with you in November. One is 1433, which is an increase in the minimum wage and a requirement for 7 days of sick leave for businesses. One is 1515, which is sometimes called the Transgender Bathroom Initiative or the Public Restroom Initiative. The other is Initiative 732, the Carbon Emissions Tax. Now, you can spend 30 seconds on each one of them, or you can spend 70 seconds on one and 10 seconds on the others. It's entirely up to you. But again, 1433, the minimum wage, 1515, the transgender bathroom, and 732, the carbon emissions tax. And this, I think, Mr. Addis.
Yes, on the transgender bathroom thing, my wife and I do work over in East Africa where we have a humanitarian nonprofit. There are people over there going to the bathroom in the street, so honestly it's hard for me to get worked up about that issue over here. On the carbon tax, everybody here, everybody in this room, we all have a vested interest in our environment. I'm a little skeptical that the government has the best answers for that, and I certainly agree with both Philip and Marty on that. On the minimum wage thing, when I was a teenager in high school, I worked at a movie theater. The minimum wage, I was back in Georgia, the minimum wage at the time was $3.35. I was being paid $285 because I think it was the Reagan administration that made some rule about the entertainment industry or something. But anyway, I was getting paid less than the minimum wage. I remember an incident where the manager had dropped a cigarette butt on the floor, and as we were walking, people walked by, and I walked by and picked it up, and he walked over to me and said, you know, I put that out there just to see who would stop and pick it up. Lessons like that and others at that job that I was making less than minimum wage at, those things have value far greater than money. I've been able to use those lessons in my life in business to succeed in many companies in different areas. So I'm not for putting the minimum wage out there. I think we need to allow people to come in at the entry level and get some job experience without shutting them out. So that's my take on that.
Now we're going to move on to a number of questions that we'll be asking specific questions of specific candidates, and Jim and I will rotate.
Individual question is for Mr. Addis. On your website, you talk about the job of the President of the Senate and say you will facilitate debate as a committee member and appointer of committee members and will do it without partisanship or corporate favoritism. But aren't you misstating the role of the President of the Senate, who mainly only serves on the Rules Committee and doesn't appoint members?
Yeah, there are a lot of committees that the Lieutenant Governor has a role in appointing, a dozen or more committees. And so the Rules Committee, specifically, as the chair of the Rules Committee, I would like to be an example of someone who is not beholden to corporate interest, which I think can affect which legislation gets out on the floor to debate. Not that I would get to choose that individually or to appoint those members to do that. However, I have friends who have been to Olympia to speak on behalf of the people. Just recently, speaking about changing the Deed of Trust Act, some wording in there that would help the people have a more judicial instead of a non-judicial foreclosure process where the banks have all the leverage at this point, and they were not able to speak to it. The legislation was changed while they were there. Most of the people that spoke to that issue, to that committee, were the lobbyists for the banks. So the point is, I think there's a problem out there, and I'd like to be an example to show people that we can do this in a better way. This system of government wasn't meant to be about those special interests. It was about the people, and I think we've got it a little mixed up and a little intertwined, and I'd like to let the government do what it's built to do, which is to protect the people. So that's what that was about.
Thank you.
All right, now we have a couple questions that will be answered by all candidates. And the first question, we'll start with Senator Hobbs, then we'll move on to Mr. Penner, and so on. Senator Hobbs, title-only bills, and this relates to the role of President of the Senate. Title-only bills are measures which are introduced without any substantive provisions, but instead contain only generalized language, which may be replaced later by more specific provisions. It's fair to say that they are used as a tactic for getting around legislative deadlines, and they limit the opportunity for public scrutiny of controversial legislation. Are title-only bills a necessary tool that should be continued, or should the Senate take steps to prohibit their use?
And just so that the public and the viewing audience knows, what happens is there'll be a bill that says, like, you know, on the environment, concerning the environment, and then there's nothing. It's just blank. So that then, at the last minute, at sometimes 2 or 3 in the morning, all of a sudden an amendment comes in on the Senate and it's handed out, bunch of stack of papers on every desk. This is this huge bill about environmental regulations. No one's had a chance to read. Most of the media is not there. There are actually some senators who are dozing off. It's late at night. This is a problem.
Mr. Yin.
You know, it's funny because we talk about transparency and honesty on stage here. 2 of the people have already lied about their background. I can prove it to you. One wants a crisis. By the way, we have a budget crisis that didn't get fixed. And by the way, who was sleeping on the job, Cyrus? Which we need names of senators. Let's be honest about what we're talking about here. This is why the public is frustrated on both sides of the aisle.
Mr. Yin, you accused 2 of the candidates on the stage of lying about their background. Could you tell us who you believe is lying about their background?
Well, I'll say this. Journalists have been decimated. The journalist industry in Olympia is decimated. That's why we don't have the information that we deserve. Journalists used to spend thousands of hours researching candidates and researching issues. This is all a very important part of the democratic process. We simply don't have that now. And I'm not going to name names because I don't think that's fair to do.
And Mr. Addis.
And by the way, I'm not one of those two. Everything I've said up here is true. The cigarette butt story, that was true. So the title-only bills, I think the underlying problem is that the government is just trying to do too much when it comes to governing our lives. I think if they had a little less to do, they would have more time to talk and discuss the issues that they actually should be, which are limited, talking about, and have more time for that. So I don't like the idea of title-only bills. It sounds like a terrible thing, though, especially the way Cyrus just described it. So yeah, I'm not for that at all.
All right, thank you.
Our next a question for all of you in this round. We start with Mayor Figueroa. And so I'd like to ask each of you, do you believe the state Supreme Court properly interpreted the Constitution in the McCleary case? And then that's fairly simple yes or no with a short explanation, but then get beyond that, the generalities on education, and give us 3 specific things the legislature should do on education in 2017. Mr. Addis.
Yes, I don't particularly care for the decision, the way it came down and the way that was all worked out. But I do think, again, to reiterate what some others have said, for instance, in 2013, there was some legislation that was brought forth in Olympia that would allow corporations that have a state tax liability to defer some of that to a nonprofit organizations that would allow parents to use in a sort of voucher system to have mobility for their kids to go where they'd like to go. So perhaps a private school or some other public school. And so what that has done in the past in states that have implemented that, and it's been done for many years and hundreds of thousands of students, it shows that in Florida, for instance, when the study was done, it showed for every dollar the state didn't get in revenue because of the tax deferment, they gained 40 cents in savings. In other words, that program, by reducing the revenue to the state, they made money off of that. It's an amazing thing, and that goes to my point of that competition breeds efficiencies and solutions. And so I do think we should have more choices out there, and I think if we really cared about the kids and their education, that's what we would do, and we would, again, look to ways to make basic education be something that it's obviously not today because we're not getting the outcomes we need and it's costing too much. We need to do something different.
Thank you. We've been told by our timekeepers in the back that we have just about exhausted the time, even though you've all been very good on your timing and spared, some of us spared the 90-second rule sometimes. So we're going to move now to closing statements. Mr. Addis.
Right. So as president of the Senate, the lieutenant governor acts as sort of a referee during debate on the Senate floor. As every sports fan knows, it's best if the referee isn't playing for one of the teams. Concerning the lieutenant governor's role in economic development and international relations, I have worked and done business on multiple continents, know how important it is to understand and respect various cultures when it comes to building relationships and attracting new business to Washington. Complex systems, like a political system, work best when decisions are pushed out to the most individual and local levels. To exemplify that belief, if elected, I commit to donating $2,000 per month of my salary, $1,000 each, to 2 charities I have personally worked with in the Puget Sound area. One of those is Year Up. It's an organization providing low-income young adults ages 18 to 24 with a combination of hands-on skill development, college credits, and corporate internships. And the Bread of Life mission in Seattle, which helps men and women overcome the cycle of homelessness through a faith-based model. These charities represent the idea that the community is the most efficient vehicle for bettering the community. And that if the money stays in the community, it can be better spent in and by the community. It's important that our government respects our right to live the lives we choose, but we have a responsibility for the consequence of our choices for the greater community. So choose wisely, because Washington deserves someone who is fiscally responsible and socially tolerant, because that's what we are. I'm Paul Addis, your Libertarian candidate for Lieutenant Governor. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you to the candidates. That concludes the AWB's Lieutenant Governor debate. Let's give everybody on the stage a round of applause. Thank you, and remember to vote in August.